Let's move on to Balthazar, and he has a great question, one that we've already discussed.
All right.
And he says this is about race extinction.
Oh.
It's a topic that came up recently.
Yeah, there was like 20 pages on it.
Sure, that it is possible that perhaps a race war can come about, and I guess I'm just going off the tongue here. Basically, is it possible? Is that something that could happen in Shadowbane, that one race actually disappears from the game world?
I would love it. And the people were right to point out that it could happen, not that it necessarily will. That's one of those things where, I'm going to suggest it and see how much latitude I'm given by my powers that be. It would always be done in such a way that it would be the product of feature character events, like a bunch of feature character events, like a trend, like 6 months worth of big meta events would culminate in this thing. And it's true, we live in a world with no permanent death, so how can a race go extinct? Well, there are lots of ways that I can think of to do it. They can change into something else, or they can leave, or they can, who knows, maybe they can die anyway. Weird things happen. I mean, part of the whole joy of fantasy and magic is you get to break the rules. It's not the kind of thing we're ever going to do lightly. We're always going to have a story purpose. We're never going to take characters away from people who have them. Never, ever. So if it's going to be more like a situation of after this huge event, we're not going to let new players make them anymore. But, again, typically it's going to be in the context of something big, like an expansion or whatnot, so that there will always be new races brought in. And, if the landscape changes that much, we're going to make sure that everybody knows that, it might be in the offing and that they'll be able to adapt to it after it happens.
Okay, we have another good question from Azur, or Azuri, but probably Azur. I think this is Azur. He says, it's actually a good one. Not too many people have asked this. And what was the Beast Lord's relationship with the elves?
What was the Beast Lord's relationship with the elves? Okay, back in the Age of Twilight, when the Deathless Empire was rising and the Dark Helgur were in charge, they did a lot of experimentation with magic, and they learned to look beyond the veils of the world. And they found all the other stuff that was out there, law, chaos, the elements. That's when channeling really was devised and invented. And they started calling things, demons and whatnot, and learning how to bind them, learning how to make them their servants. They found these entities out there, the Beast Lords, and they were beings of immense power who could teach them lots of stuff. And the elves, in fact, decided to latch onto them because they seemed willing to do a lot more for them than the Allfather was. And if you read the lore, there was that whole movement that posited that they were actually the children of the Beast, one of the Beast Lords instead of the Allfather. Nowadays, after the taming, the Beast Lords have really taken a low profile, and they don't really interact with people that much anymore. The Rangers and the Druids are on decent terms with them, but most elves have given them up. They were a means toward an end, and they didn't work, so we're finding something else.
Well, let's move on. Other than that, I mean, obviously, the elves don't deal with them, but other than the Druids and the Rangers, are there any other races that deal with them?
Not so much that I can think of. Right now, there's a lot going on that they may have a hand in, but it's more like they're doing stuff. There are some critters that are pretty much that they're responsible for, and they might have some interesting links to shape-changing and lycanthropy that I'm not prepared to go into at this time. But there you go. Right.
Okay, let's go. Molecular wants to ask some feature character questions.
I know that name.
Let's see this one. Yeah, Molecular. She or he is worried about. Will the feature character program be? And you might just talk briefly about this.
Okay.
Actively make sure that all fragments will be uncovered equally by events and so forth.
I'm of two minds about this. One way that I want to go would be to have maybe one or two fragments that really are outside of the plot. So if you don't want to mess with the plot, and more importantly, you don't want the plot messing with you, go there. And then, if some earth-shaking thing happens that affects the entire lay of the land, sorry, it affected the entire lay of the land. On the other hand, though I probably would be more of a situation where even those fragments might have a few, they just wouldn't have them near the frequency that others would. You know, we're not going to have roleplay servers versus PK servers. Every server is a PK server, and every server is a roleplay server, or PvP server, whatever. There will probably be ones that are heavier on the plot and ones that are lighter on the plot. And the challenge that we're going to have is making that clear to you guys from the outset which is which, so that you can choose the ones you want.
All right.
There you go.
Molecular also has another good question I think it's worthy to ask, and one that's been brought up a few times before. How did the gods come into being? The lore mentions being awakened.
Yeah.
Was there a beginning?
Well, there are beginnings and there are beginnings. Bryalis, Sadrin, and Voliandra were awakened. They were asleep when the Allfather got to the world.
You have to lift this up a little bit when you're sitting up.
Oh, okay. They were asleep when the Allfather got to the world, which raises the question, what happened to them before they went to sleep? Don't know. The dragon was asleep too, and the world was all barren and whatnot. So one could posit that, you know, if we want to get all Hindu, there was a previous incarnation of the world and something happened to it that made it get all dark and icy. And the Allfather came from outside, came into the world, and woke everything up, and then it started. Where'd the Allfather come from? Well, he's never really said, and people aren't really prepared to guess. As far as the other gods, there was a thread I got into on the Holy Church forum that basically posits the idea that his companions, Thurin, Malog, and Kanarin, were born of his thought, that there are manifestations of one part of his personality that now have an independent existence of him, and hence can do things like, you know, turn on him and stuff, but that they sprung from him.